Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 29th of July 2011. My name is Totalbiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, that is mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, with topics for future shows. The game in the background is Batman Arkham Asylum, where I will be showing you, amongst other things, how to troll the Riddler. You will see in a moment exactly what I mean by that. Whatever the case, I am currently in my hotel room. I'm down in Loughborough, and I'll be casting the ECL tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning British time. That's midday CEST. Hopefully you guys will tune into that. It is before MLG. It should not clash with MLG at all, so there is some StarCraft action going on my Justin TV channel on the 30th of July. Whatever the case, let's get on with this, and I will probably be a little bit quieter than usual because apparently shouting in a hotel is a really terrible idea. The first email comes in right here from Nick, and it says, "It was recently announced that Duke Nukem Forever will be getting a patch allowing the gamer to carry 4 weapons rather than just 2. I personally see this as the developers listening to post-release feedback and improving the game. Although I'm sure others will see it as meddling and changing the way the game plays, whether it be for better or for worse. What do you think of patches that change the basic game mechanics rather than just bug fixes?" Well, they're always a very dangerous thing to do, aren't they? There are, in my opinion, 3 kinds of patches. There's the bug fix patch, which pretty much everybody loves because, hey, it fixes the problem with the game. There's balance patches, which can sometimes be quite controversial, particularly in games like StarCraft 2. Changes can be made which the developers believe are best for the game, but actually might not end up being that way. And then there's the full-on, we're going to change parts of the game patch, which can be extremely controversial potentially, and that's something you do have to watch out for. As regards to the Duke Nukem Forever changes, while I would view it as initially positive, you have to understand the game was not created with those ideas in mind. The idea of only having 2 weapons in that game is actually a balance thing, and I don't think it's good. I mean, I've told you at great length the problems that I've got with that game, but now changing it to 4 just doesn't work. It's just absolutely absurd. I mean, you can run around with an RPG and a Devastator 100% of the time. I can't think of a time when you actually lose those, and you can get them both relatively early on. So you can just keep them, refill them in ammo boxes, and then you've suddenly got massively OP weapons 100% of the time. It just doesn't even make any sense. As I said, I don't know what Gearbox is really playing out there. I know they're trying to answer some of the concerns of the community, but at the end of the day, the game is broken. People are not going to just buy the game suddenly because they've patched in a 4 weapon limit instead of 2. That's not going to help. Maybe it'll help the multiplayer. Does it allow 4 weapons in the multiplayer? Because I suppose in that case it does make sense, but people are not going to suddenly turn around and say, "Oh Lord, Gearbox have finally seen the light and this game is better." Bear in mind that it wasn't really Gearbox's responsibility anyway. They were just trying to polish up the mess that 3D Realms left. But whatever the case, it doesn't fix the game, and as far as I'm concerned, it could end up breaking it quite fundamentally, because while it was balanced in a bad way and the game was designed generally poorly, that's still a key part of the game, and the game is balanced that way around you having 2 weapons at any given time, not 4. So I really don't know what they're trying to pull, honestly. I think the developers should be extremely careful, incredibly careful when they try and do something like this. It is potentially very dangerous. It can harm the experience for an awful lot of people. And in this case, I suppose the idea is to try and appease some of the PC guys, and I don't think it's going to work. I don't see that happening. PC guys have already written off Duke Nukem as being a bad game, for the most part. Some people enjoy it, most don't seem to. It was badly reviewed across the board. It was panned by many gamers indeed, and rightly so as far as I'm concerned. I think that all of the concerns were entirely justified and reasonable on the part of the people that were expressing them. But yes, be very, very careful if you're going to be doing things like that. Don't fix what isn't broken, and even if you think it is broken, if it's a mechanic, then you should be very careful about switching it round, because it can cause people to get very upset, because of course they've got used to that, and the kind of people that didn't like it, they've probably left by now. That's the real deal. The thing is that they've probably quit the game and moved on to another one. You're not going to suddenly draw them back by fixing that, and you're going to alienate the people that actually liked it in the first place. This one comes in from Chris that says, "I was visiting my local CEX," that, by the way, is Computer Exchange, it is not actually an X-rated store, "to scout the shelves for games I might get when I get paid, when I witnessed something rather shocking. I overheard a child who couldn't have been older than 8 ask his mum to buy him some games. The games were Naughty Bear, Call of Duty Black Ops, GTA 4, and Red Dead Redemption. I felt so angry and disgusted at his mother that was buying these for him. She seemed completely oblivious to the fact that the PEGI rating on the front even existed, it seems, and proceeded to just buy them. And even though it was pretty easy to hear in the shop that she was buying these games for him, she was served anyway. There's always the ongoing issue that the media portrays video games making kids violent. Why should we pin all the blame on the children when it's the parents that buy these for them? How do you feel about the sale of games, not so much to the underage, but to the parents at the counter, when the shopkeeper blatantly knows that they are buying it for their child right next to them? Right, well, this is a really thorny issue. For one thing, I don't see any evidence whatsoever that computer games actually make kids violent. I think that exposing kids to a lot of disturbing imagery is perhaps a bad thing in the long run, but there is no proof whatsoever. And bear in mind that there have been many studies. They have been trying to prove this for a very long time. There is no connection whatsoever between violence in children and, of course, violence in video games. I'm fairly sure that you can all think of examples when you were younger of seeing, say, a violent film. In prime example, when I was 8 years old, I saw Terminator for the first time. That's an 18-rated movie in this country. That's a very, very violent, extremely violent film, in fact. So, to me, I really don't see that argument as being valid. Now, parental responsibility is a big deal, but also parental freedom, to me, is a big deal as well. I don't think we should be necessarily regulating the power of the parents in terms of what media they expose their kids to, particularly when there is absolutely no evidence whatsoever to suggest that these games actually cause violent behavior. When we know that something is bad, then we regulate it. For instance, if a parent was found giving vodka to their 8-year-old, then I would imagine that a child abuse case would be brought on. If that was found out, I think that would be where social services got involved. That never happens with video games. You want to know why? Because we know for a fact that an 8-year-old binge drinking on vodka is harmful to that 8-year-old's health. An 8-year-old playing Call of Duty, on the other hand, there is no evidence to suggest that that is the case whatsoever. I say, I played violent video games when I was a kid. I do not have violent feelings towards other people. I have no desire to go out on a murderous rampage, any more than anybody else does. There is just no proof of it whatsoever. I mean, for God's sake, when I was 6 years old, I was given a big box set of tapes. You want to know what was on it? The entire Lord of the Rings radio play. Yes, they did a radio play over here. It was actually very, very good. Really good music as well. Some of you may remember it. I was given that. Lord of the Rings is an extremely violent series. There is mass slaughter going on in that. There is black magic. There are very evil, horrendous things being done in Lord of the Rings. It's actually kind of grimdark. When I was about 5, I had The Hobbit read to me. Once again, The Hobbit is a violent book. None of these things had any effect on me whatsoever. Kids do have the ability to distinguish fantasy from reality more so than people seem to believe. I absolutely do not believe that at this point we should be considering video games to be a bad influence on kids in terms of making them violent. I think there are other things that they could cause. For instance, the idea that maybe an 8-year-old goes on Xbox Live and just keeps trash-talking people. I think that's potentially unhealthy. I mean, it can turn them into an antisocial moron. It can turn them into a socially awkward idiot. It could cause them to go into ridiculous outbursts in the middle of a classroom simply because they don't know when it's appropriate to release their feelings in an angry manner. But then again, you can also argue with the opposite point, that this game gives a release for kids that get frustrated and angry, so they take it out on something that is not real. And you know what? That argument continues to go through into teenage years, and I am almost convinced, in fact, that video games give a very real outlet to teenagers, and in the long run, that's actually good for them, as opposed to the other way around. So, in this case, I'm going to have to side with the parent in terms of parental choice. I think that parents should, without question, inform themselves, and they should be active in the lives of their kids. The only problem in this case that I see is if, one, this parent is simply giving in to the demands of their spoiled child repeatedly, and of course raising a brat, or secondly, that she's using the PlayStation to raise her kid. You know, the PlayStation is not a babysitter. You have to be actively involved in the raising of your child, for God's sake. Just as an example, by the way, I have an 8-year-old son. He's currently in the States with my wife, needless to say. He plays StarCraft 2. I have no problem with him playing StarCraft 2 whatsoever. StarCraft 2 is a violent game. He has shown absolutely no sign of being affected by this game in any way, shape, or form. I am happy for him to continue to play it. It would appear to develop his multitasking skills, it would make him a more strategic thinker, and he also takes out his frustration, which he sometimes has, on video games, as opposed to on real people, or indeed on the animals, for instance, the frickin' house cat. And he is not a violent person. So I do not see the problem with that one little bit, as long as parents have an active role in their kids' development and understand what exactly it is that they're getting them into. This one comes in from Connor that says, recently a lot of developers have re-released games as HD remakes. This year is really no different, with the remakes of Halo, Metal Gear Solid 2, Resident Evil 4, etc. But do you think these developers could be making other games, new IPs? This year has too many HD remakes coming out, and I don't believe every HD remake should be justified, especially when they are priced for £30 new, when I could just purchase the exact same game for under £10. What are your thoughts on the matter? Well, I think that some HD remakes can most certainly be justified. A prime example of this would be Beyond Good and Evil HD. That is incredibly well justified, aside from the fact that it's really not all that HD, as I found out on the PS3. I put it in, it's like, this actually looks exactly the same as it did on my PC. Oh, wait. Yes, that would make sense. So they really haven't done an awful lot to that, but there are a lot of other games that, yes, actually would deserve an HD remake. A prime example is one coming out later in the year on Xbox Live Arcade. It's called Guardian Heroes. It was a game for the Sega Saturn, and as a result, barely anyone played it. It is one of the best brawlers ever made. It is an amazing game. It's getting an HD remake. Admittedly, I will probably play it on original graphics mode because I'm a nostalgia whore, but it deserves another shot. There are some games that most certainly deserve another shot. I really don't think we need an HD remake of Resident Evil 4. I mean, who hasn't played that game, honestly? It's not really all that old in relation to other titles. It is certainly not past its best. You could make arguments, for instance, for HD remakes of N64 titles, because those games actually look really bad in this day and age. N64 titles tend not to age well, which is the reason why remaking Ocarina made so much sense. Remaking games like Jet Force Gemini, I believe they already remade Perfect Dark, things like that, that all makes sense. Remaking Resident Evil 4, not so much, because it's not actually a bad-looking game anyway. I mean, it would make more sense to put Resident Evil 4 on a handheld. I mean, it could easily play on the 3DS, and then they go and release Mercenaries instead, which is nowhere near what people wanted. I think if you just re-released a 3D version of Resident Evil 4 on the 3DS, people would probably buy it, because at the end of the day, Resident Evil 4 is still a really good game, and the graphics don't put you off it. In fact, actually, the slightly grainy graphics give it some atmosphere, kind of like some of the latest Silent Hill titles. I also don't believe that it's taking development time away from other IP. In fact, it could be doing the opposite. If a studio is able to re-release a game that didn't do very well and then earn significantly more often, that can be used to fund other titles, and it can also be used as a really great benchmark to say to the publisher, look guys, we gave this a second shot and now audiences are actually willing to accept this, so maybe we can do a sequel, or maybe you guys will actually greenlight another original IP. Beyond Good and Evil is a good example, and Ubisoft has released quite a few games that are pretty original. I mean, they're actually kind of into their original IP. Admittedly, they do tend to then milk it after the fact, but they've released all sorts of original IP, of course, including Assassin's Creed. Ruse came out as well, and they are working on various other titles, and Beyond Good and Evil was a Ubisoft release. It would be very nice to see Beyond Good and Evil 2, and I would think that if that HD remake did well, then perhaps they would greenlight that, because it has been around for a while. I mean, there's been a teaser trailer going out, but nobody really knows if it's coming out or not, so I'm hoping that that actually sells pretty well, so that'll give Ubisoft more encouragement to continue with the sequel. But yes, you're right, there are some remakes that are absolutely unnecessary. I mean, I don't see the point in remaking Halo. I mean, really now. Remaking Halo? Are we serious about that? Why do we want to do that? It will sell, no doubt, and that is, without question, I think, just a cash grab. It serves no practical purpose. There's no reason to remake that game, but they're going to do it anyway because, hey, it will make them some money. When it comes down to games like that and perhaps Metal Gear Solid 2, I don't see the point aside from being a cash cow. And I would think that when you're going to remake a game like that you would, without question, release it at a budget price. I don't know what the price of the Halo remake is going to be, but if they actually release the Anniversary Edition at a full price, then quite frankly, they're having a laugh, and that could actually set a very dangerous precedent for a lot more companies to do that. And it is absolutely unacceptable to release an old game with a new Code of Paint at the price that your old game was in the first place. It's absurd, and I would hope not to see all that much more of that, and more remakes focused on trying to bring a lesser-known title, perhaps one that didn't sell very well, back to the fore with a modern coat of paint. That, I think, is beneficial to the scene. Okay, folks, that is me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox. Bear in mind that I am away in Loughborough this weekend doing casting, so the video schedule will be very intermittent, and I will be back on Monday evening. I'll see you next time.